The wind screams across the Montana wilderness like a dying animal, hurling snow sideways through the blackness. The world has disappeared beneath a veil of white fury. No stars, no moon. Only the howl of the storm and the crunch of hooves struggling through drifts that swallow everything whole. A lone rider hunches forward in his saddle, ice clinging to his beard, his breath coming in ragged clouds that vanish instantly into the void. His name is Caleb Stone, a man who learned long ago that the frontier takes more than it gives, and tonight it's trying to take what little he has left his life. His horse stumbles, nearly goes down. Caleb grips the reins tighter, whispers something urgent into the animal's ear, words lost to the storm. He can barely see 10 feet ahead, but somewhere in this frozen hell there's a cabin. His cabin, if he can just make it home, if his frozen fingers can hold on a little longer, if the cold doesn't claim him first. The temperature has dropped so low that each breath burns his lungs like swallowing broken glass. He's been out here for 3 hours, searching for a missing calf that's probably already dead, and now he's fighting for his own survival. Then there, a flicker of orange light through the white chaos. The cabin, his cabin. But something's wrong. There's smoke rising from the chimney, and he left no fire burning. His hand instinctively moves to the rifle strapped to his saddle. Out here, miles from the nearest town, unexpected visitors usually mean trouble. Rustlers, drifters, desperate men driven to desperate things by the merciless winter. The cabin, exterior, continuous. Caleb dismounts, his boots sinking knee-deep into fresh snow. He leads his horse to the lean-to shelter on the cabin's east side, his eyes never leaving the door. Golden firelight seeps through the gaps in the shuttered window. He can hear nothing over the storm, no voices, no movement. His heart pounds as he checks his rifle, brushing ice from the barrel. He's been alone for 3 years, ever since his wife Sarah died giving birth to a stillborn son. He chose this isolation, built this cabin at the edge of nowhere because loneliness felt safer than trying to love again. But tonight, someone has invaded his sanctuary. He kicks the door open, rifle raised. The warmth hits him first, almost painful after the brutal cold. The fire crackles in the stone hearth, casting dancing shadows across the rough-hewn walls. And there, pressed against the far corner like a frightened animal, is a woman clutching a small child to her chest. Her eyes are wide with terror, her face pale as the snow outside. The little girl in her arms can't be more than 5 or 6, her face buried in her mother's shoulder, tiny body trembling. "Don't shoot," the woman gasps, her voice breaking. "Please, we'll leave. We'll go right now. She was so cold. I saw your cabin, and the door was unlocked, and I thought." Tears stream down her face, freezing in the bitter air that's rushing in through the open door behind Caleb. He lowers the rifle slowly, kicks the door shut against the storm. Now he can see them clearly in the firelight. The woman's clothes are soaked through, frozen in places. Her lips have a blue tint. The child isn't moving much, just shivering in weak, shallow tremors. They're both dying, he realizes. Maybe another hour in this storm and they would have been gone. The cabin, interior, moments later. "How long have you been out there?" Caleb asks, setting the rifle aside and moving toward them. The woman flinches, pulls her daughter closer. "Since morning. Our wagon. The wheel broke. My husband went for help. He said to wait, but he never came back, and it got so cold, and Emma." She stopped talking, and I couldn't let her. The words tumble out in a rush, punctuated by sobs and chattering teeth. Caleb doesn't hesitate. He's seen what this cold does to people. He's seen frozen bodies found weeks later, preserved like statues in the snow. He pulls blankets from his chest, thick wool ones that smell like cedar and wood smoke. "Get those wet clothes off her, both of you. There's dry clothes in that trunk, they're too big but they're warm. I'll make coffee, hot food." The woman stares at him like she doesn't quite believe he's real. You're helping us? "Ma'am, you're in my cabin, by my fire, And that little girl needs to get warm before she loses fingers, or worse. We'll sort out the rest later. Move. Time transition. 1 hour later. The storm continues its assault outside, but inside the cabin, life is slowly returning. The woman, her name is Rebecca Mason, sits wrapped in one of Caleb's old flannel shirts and wool pants, held up with rope. Her daughter Emma is bundled in blankets by the fire, sipping hot broth from a tin cup. Color has returned to both their faces. Rebecca watches Caleb move around the small space with the efficiency of a man accustomed to taking care of himself. He adds more wood to the fire, refills Emma's cup, checks the windows to make sure they're sealed tight against the cold. "Your husband," Caleb says finally, not looking at her. "Which direction did he go?" Rebecca's hands tighten around her own cup. "West, toward Broken Ridge. That was 10 hours ago." Caleb knows what that means. Broken Ridge is 15 miles of open country in good weather. In this blizzard, it might as well be on the moon. If her husband made it to town, he'd have sent help. If he didn't make it, the snow has already buried any trace of him. "I'm sorry," he says simply. "He wasn't." Rebecca stops, swallows hard. "He wasn't a bad man, just weak and scared, and not cut out for this country. I begged him not to come west, but he had dreams of gold and land and—" She laughs bitterly. "Dreams don't keep you warm when the temperature drops below zero." Emma makes a small sound, and Rebecca immediately shifts her attention back to her daughter, smoothing the girl's dark hair with gentle fingers. Watching them, Caleb feels something crack open inside his chest, some frozen place he thought had died with Sarah. The cabin. Later that night. The storm shows no sign of stopping. If anything, it's getting worse. The walls shake with each gust of wind. Snow is piling against the door, sealing them in. Caleb has seen storms like this last for days, leaving the whole territory buried under 6 feet of white silence. He gives Rebecca his bed, a simple frame with a corn husk mattress, and makes a pallet for himself near the fire. Emma is already asleep, exhausted by fear and cold, and the simple relief of being warm again. "Thank you," Rebecca whispers from the darkness, "for not turning us out. What kind of man would do that?" Caleb responds, staring into the flames. "You'd be surprised. There's pain in her voice, old wounds that have nothing to do with the cold. The world isn't kind to women alone with children, especially out here." Caleb knows she's right. He's seen it himself, widows and orphans treated like burdens, like liabilities. The frontier has no mercy for weakness, real or perceived. "How old is she?" "Your daughter, 6. She'll be 7 in April." Rebecca pauses. "If we live to see April." The words hang in the air between them, heavy with truth. Caleb sits up, looks toward the bed where he can just make out Rebecca's silhouette. "Your wagon, where is it?" "About 2 miles south, near the old creek bed." "Why?" "Because if the storm breaks, I'll go look for it, see if anything's salvageable, and I'll look for your husband too, though." He doesn't finish the sentence. He doesn't need to. "He's dead." Rebecca says it flatly, without emotion. "I knew it when he didn't come back. Part of me knew it when we left Ohio. He wasn't made for this life. But Emma deserves better than dying in a snowstorm because her father was a fool and her mother had no choice." The cabin, 3 days later, morning. The storm finally breaks on the 3rd day, leaving behind a world transformed. Snow covers everything and drifts 10 and 12 feet high, sculpting the landscape into alien shapes. The sky is impossibly blue, the sun so bright on the white expanse that it hurts to look at it. Caleb steps outside, his breath fogging in air that's still brutally cold but calm now. Quiet. The silence after days of howling wind is almost eerie. Rebecca and Emma have settled into a strange domestic rhythm with him. Emma has started talking again, shy at first, then with growing confidence. She follows Caleb around the cabin, asking questions about everything, the pelts hanging on the walls, the coffee grinder, the leather saddle in the corner. Rebecca cooks what little food they have, stretching Caleb's winter supplies to feed 3 instead of 1. At night, they sit by the fire, and sometimes Rebecca talks about Ohio, about her parents' farm, about the life she left behind chasing her husband's dreams. Caleb finds himself listening to the sound of her voice like a man dying of thirst finds water. He hasn't realized how hungry he's been for human connection, for the simple presence of another person who doesn't want anything from him except to survive another day. On the 4th morning, he saddles his horse. "I'm going to look for the wagon." Rebecca nods. She knows what else he's looking for. Emma is playing with a carved wooden horse Caleb whittled for her by the fire. "Be careful." He finds the wagon around noon, half buried in snow near the frozen creek. One wheel is indeed broken, the cargo scattered and useless. He finds Rebecca's husband 100 yards away, curled beneath a cottonwood tree, frozen solid. The man's face is peaceful, almost serene. Death by cold is supposed to feel like falling asleep. Caleb hopes that's true. He can't bury the man, the ground is frozen harder than iron, so he marks the spot with stones and a cross made from wagon boards. He'll come back in spring, do it proper. The cabin, that evening. "I found him," Caleb says simply when he returns. Emma is already asleep, exhausted from playing in the snow under Rebecca's watchful eye. Rebecca nods slowly. She doesn't cry. She's known for days. "Thank you for looking." They sit in silence for a long moment, the fire crackling between them. Finally, Caleb speaks, the words coming out rough and uncertain. "The nearest town is 30 miles. The snow's too deep for travel, will be for weeks. Even when it melts enough to get through, you'll need a wagon, supplies. And then what? Where will you go?" "I don't know." Rebecca's voice is barely a whisper. "I have no money, no family, no husband. A woman alone with a child." She doesn't finish, but they both know how that story ends. Orphanages, if they're lucky. Poverty, and worse if they're not. Caleb takes a deep breath. He's been thinking about this for 3 days, fighting with himself. But the truth is simple and undeniable. He doesn't want them to leave. For the first time in 3 years, his cabin feels like a home instead of a tomb. "You could stay." For the first time, Rebecca looks up sharply. "What?" "Stay. Here. Your daughter needs a home." He stops, the enormity of what he's about to say, making his throat tight. But he pushes through because it's true, because he means it more than he's meant anything in years. "Your daughter needs a home, and my bed needs you." The words come out raw, honest, terrifying in their vulnerability. I'm not saying it right. I mean, I've been alone too long. This cabin, it's just been a place to wait for death. But these last few days, hearing Emma laugh, hearing you hum while you cook, it's reminded me what living actually feels like. I know it's too soon. I know you just lost your husband. But when spring comes, when you have to decide where to go, consider staying. Consider making a life here. With me. The silence that follows is crushing. Rebecca stares at him, her eyes wide and unreadable in the firelight. Caleb feels his heart hammering against his ribs. He's offered everything: his home, his protection, his future. The heart he thought had died and been buried in frozen ground. Then Rebecca speaks, and her words shatter him. "I can't." The cabin, continuous. "I can't," she repeats, and now there are tears streaming down her face. "Caleb, you're a good man. A better man than any I've known, but I can't." She takes a shuddering breath. "I married my husband when I was 16 because my father said I should. I followed him west because he demanded it. I've spent 10 years living someone else's life, making someone else's choices, and now he's dead, and I'm finally, terribly free, and I can't." Her voice breaks. "I can't just step from one man's shadow into another's, no matter how kind, no matter how much I—" She stops herself. Caleb feels something inside him crumble. He nods slowly, looking away because he can't bear to see the pain in her eyes that mirrors his own. "I understand." "No, you don't." Rebecca moves closer, her hand reaching out to touch his arm. Listen to me. I've been someone's daughter, someone's wife, someone's mother. But I've never been just Rebecca. I don't even know who that is. And Emma, she's watched her mother be small and silent and afraid for her entire life. What kind of lesson is that? She wipes her eyes roughly. I need to stand on my own. I need to prove to myself and to her that women can be more than just appendages to men, even good men, even men we could love. The last word hangs in the air between them, admission and denial all at once. When spring comes, Rebecca continues, her voice stronger now, Emma and I will go to California. I have a cousin there, in San Francisco. She runs a boarding house. She wrote me once, said there was always work for women willing to do it. I'm not afraid of hard work. I'll make a life for us, a life that's ours. Caleb nods, his jaw tight. Every instinct in him wants to argue, to convince her, to promise that staying wouldn't mean losing herself. But he respects her too much for that. She's choosing courage over comfort, independence over security. It's the kind of strength his Sarah would have admired. Then I'll help you. When the snow melts, I'll take you to town, help you get a wagon, supplies, whatever you need for the journey. Why would you do that? Rebecca asks. Why help me leave? Because, Caleb says, meeting her eyes finally, you deserve to find out who Rebecca is, and Emma deserves to see her mother be brave. Time transition, spring. Winter loosens its grip slowly, reluctantly. The snow melts in fits and starts, revealing the brown earth beneath like secrets coming to light. Rebecca and Emma stay through February, through March, through the last cold snaps of early April. It's an agonizing kind of sweetness, this time they have together. Caleb teaches Emma to ride his old mare, holds her steady in the saddle while she squeals with delight. Rebecca learns to shoot, to trap, to do the 100 small things that survival demands. They work side by side, mending fences, tending the animals that winter spared, planning the garden that will feed whoever remains when summer comes. At night, they sit by the fire and talk. Rebecca tells stories of her childhood, of the girl she was before life made her small. Caleb speaks of Sarah, of their brief happiness, of the grief that made him a hermit. They share their wounds with the careful intimacy of people who know time is running out. Sometimes their hands brush when passing a cup of coffee. Sometimes their eyes meet and hold a moment too long. But Rebecca never wavers from her decision, and Caleb never asks her to. The town, May, morning. The day comes in early May when the roads are finally passable. Caleb drives them to town in a wagon he traded a winter's worth of pelts for. Emma sits between them, chattering excitedly about California, about the ocean she's never seen. Rebecca is quieter, her hand resting on a small bundle of possessions, everything she owns in the world. At the general store, Caleb buys supplies for their journey. Salt pork, flour, coffee, dried fruit, blankets, ammunition. He insists on paying, refusing Rebecca's weak protests. The storekeeper gives them a knowing look, probably thinking they're husband and wife, probably wondering why the woman looks so sad when she should be excited about going west. Outside, as they load the wagon, Emma suddenly throws her arms around Caleb's waist. I don't want to go, she sobs into his coat. I want to stay with you. Caleb kneels down, takes her small face in his rough hands. You're going to have an adventure. You're going to see things most folks only dream about. And your mama, she's the bravest person I know. You stick with her, you'll be just fine. Will we ever see you again? Emma asks. It's Rebecca who answers. Someday, she says, her voice thick. Maybe someday. The road, leaving town, afternoon. Caleb rides alongside their wagon for the first 5 miles, until they reach the fork, where one road continues west and the other turns north, back toward his cabin. This is where they have to say goodbye. He pulls his horse to a stop, and Rebecca halts the wagon beside him. For a long moment, they just look at each other. There's so much to say and no way to say it. Emma has fallen asleep in the back, exhausted from the emotion of leaving. Thank you, Rebecca finally says, for saving us, for giving us a winter to heal, for understanding." Finally says. Caleb nods. "You write when you get there. Let me know you made it safe." "I will." She pauses, then, "Caleb, if I was ready, if I was whole enough, it would be you." "I know," he says quietly. "But you need to be whole for yourself first. I understand that now." Rebecca picks up the reins, then stops. She reaches into her pocket and pulls out something small, presses it into his hand. It's a carved wooden heart, amateur work, but done with care. "Emma made it. She wanted you to have something to remember us by." Caleb closes his fingers around it, his throat too tight for words. "Maybe someday isn't never," Rebecca says, and there's something like hope in her voice. "Maybe it's just not yet." Then she clicks her tongue, and the wagon lurches forward. Caleb sits on his horse and watches them go, getting smaller and smaller against the vast western sky until they're just a speck, then nothing at all. The cabin, sunset. Caleb returns to his cabin as the sun sets, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. The place feels emptier than it did before Rebecca and Emma arrived, but it's a different kind of empty. Not the hollow deadness of a tomb, but the quiet of a place waiting to be filled again. He builds a fire, makes coffee, sits in his chair with the wooden heart in his palm. Outside, spring is transforming the world, ice melting, green things pushing up through the earth, life returning after the long death of winter. He thinks about Rebecca's words. Maybe someday isn't never. Maybe it's just not yet. For the first time in 3 years, Caleb allows himself to hope. Not for certainty, not for promises, but for possibility. She needs to find herself. He needs to become someone worth coming back to. The frontier is hard and vast and unforgiving, but it's also a place where people can be remade, where endings can become beginnings. He sets the wooden heart on the mantle, next to the picture of Sarah. 2 women who taught him that love isn't about possession, it's about witness. It's about seeing someone for who they truly are and who they could become, and loving them enough to let them make the journey. Outside, a bird calls in the gathering darkness. Spring is here, summer will follow, and maybe, someday, when Rebecca has found what she's looking for, when she's become who she needs to be, 2 paths that diverged will find a way to meet again. For now, there's wood to chop, seeds to plant, a life to live. Caleb Stone is no longer just waiting to die. He's learning, slowly, to live again.